thank you, and it's a delight to be here. I've been to various freedom privacy conferences over the years, and it's always a pleasure. 47 U.S.C. 230 is an exceptionalist statute. It says the internet is different from other media, and it's one of the very few remaining exceptional statutes that actually treats the internet more favorably than offline media. To the extent that we've seen exceptionalist regulation over the years, we've progressively seen governments taking efforts at regulating the internet more harshly than they do offline media. In some type of moral panic, outrage, or otherwise skepticism that the internet really should be allowed to do what it does, even if we see the exact same type of behavior offline. So my goal for my brief remarks here is to try and defend the idea that we have an exceptional statute that is more favorable to the internet. What do we get by treating the internet more favorably than we do other media? And there are many different ways of justifying this exceptionalism. A lot of times you hear it lumped into categories like this advances free speech goals. And I'm fine with that argument, but it's rather intangible. It's kind of hard to get our arms around that. How do we know that this particular statute is producing this particular, that particular type of free speech that we actually want? When you're dealing with those levels of vagary, it's very hard to have, I think, an intelligent discussion. Someone says, 230 advances free speech. Someone says, no, it doesn't. Now what? Okay. So I'm going to take a different approach to trying to justify the exceptions. I'm going to focus on 47 U.S.C. 230 as an economic policy, what it does for our economy, and how it changes our economy in favorable ways. This is part of a broader research project that I've been working on, where I've been thinking about how the invisible hand helps marketplace mechanisms. If you recall, going back to basic economics, we let willing buyers and willing sellers meet in the marketplace, and through some invisible hand, through magic, we come up with an efficient market. There are a lot of things, that's obviously an abstraction. There are a lot of things that we do regulatorily that can change the dynamics of the invisible hand. We can improve the invisible hand, we can hinder the invisible hand regulatorily. And one of the things that I've been particularly interested in is how we regulate the flow of information in the marketplace that helps guide that invisible hand. What do we do to help the movement of information? What do we do to restrict it? And what effect does that have on the marketplace setting prices between willing buyers and willing sellers the way that we would like it to do? So I have a long-term project looking at that broad issue, and 47 U.S.C. 230 is a nice case study about how a government can enact a regulation that I will argue improves the invisible hand. So what we get from this deregulation of internet content is we get better marketplace mechanisms. I'm going to make my argument to you, and I'm going to focus on a specific class of information. 47 U.S.C. 230 is agnostic about the kind of information that's being moved between authors and readers. It covers everything that can fit within the statutory definition, which is, I think, intentionally broad. But I'm going to pull out one class of that broad scope of information and look at what it does to, what the statute does to that. I'm particularly interested in consumer reviews. Now, my background is in consumer reviews. I was general counsel at Opinions almost a decade ago now. This is obviously informed by my own firsthand experiences. But one of the things I find so interesting is the explosion of consumer reviews online and the effective absence of any equivalent to consumer reviews in the offline world. When you think, maybe you guys can help me identify examples of consumer reviews in the offline world that were published in some form of mediated medium. Obviously, we have the consumer reviews that we share orally with each other, the water cooler talk, hey, what did you do this weekend, and on ensues a consumer review. But in terms of published consumer reviews, they were actually quite rare. Think about one example, Zagat's. Well, Zagat's was a consumer review publication. It quoted little words from consumer reviews, but it's not the way we think about consumer reviews in the online context. It was heavily filtered, very small snippets of any particular consumer's review was included in that. That's an example of the kind of things that we would see offline, and maybe that's about the best example we can quote offline. For the most part, in the offline world, we relied upon professional reviews. We had people who were paid to be professional reviewers, the food critic, or the art critic, or the movie critic. And those people had specialization in developing reviews, and they had all kinds of limitations. They couldn't see everything that they were trying to review, and they certainly had their own idiosyncratic biases that would color their particular assessment. In the online world, we're seeing a huge explosion of consumer review activity. Rip-Off Report being an example of that, but it's only one of thousands or even tens of thousands of consumer review sites we see. And within those review sites, we're seeing in some cases millions of consumer reviews being published through any particular site. So when you add it up, we've just had this influx of new information that wasn't being published in the offline world that's now being available here. And that information has a very salutary effect on the marketplace mechanisms. Remember, we've got this invisible hand guiding buyers and sellers in the marketplace to making transactions. For the buyers, and in some cases the sellers, to make good choices, not only about the price, but also who to transact with, they need to know the quality and reputation of the people that they're transacting with. They need to have that kind of information. Does this person actually deliver what they promised? Now, as a practical matter, what we really want is the good producers to be recognized, and we want the bad producers to be punished. And that all depends on information from people who've had first-hand experience and say, this person promised me X and delivered X, or this person promised me X and delivered Y. And that kind of information helps us decide who we should transact with. It rewards the good producers and punishes the bad ones. So consumer reviews can play a very valuable role in disciplining the invisible hand, making sure that it actually steers people to do the things that we want to happen in a marketplace. Now, consumer review websites have played a critical role in helping shake loose all this consumer information that we were getting in the offline world. Consumer review websites can help generate consumer reviews. They can provide incentives for consumers to author other reviews. They can provide non-financial incentives as well as financial ones. And then they can also play a critical role in organizing the consumer reviews. So we don't just want this big, unorganized corpus of consumer reviews. We want somebody to put some structure around it to help prioritize which reviews are most useful and perhaps to develop metadata, some distillations of the reviews that get summarized into more digestible formats. And consumer review websites play those valuable roles of helping shake loose that information and then putting in a package that actually helps it make the marketplace work better. As I've already indicated, and I'm going to offer up as an empirical assessment without empirical proof. So we're in a little bit of a dicey situation here, but I'm a law professor. This is what we do. I know it's garbage, but this is just how we work. I'm going to advance the empirical assessment that 47 U.C. 230 has played the critical role in developing this category of consumer review websites. Maria gave her ad hoc take on that. I think that's true. I can certainly speak from my experiences and opinions and say, yes, that was true as well. I'm not sure how else I can prove it to you, but I will take the position that if you look at what it takes to develop a functioning class of consumer review websites, 47 U.C. 230 is part of that secret sauce. It's part of the necessary, perhaps even sufficient, but maybe not, but necessary components to make that category work. Let's talk about how the statute overlays on top of these consumer review websites. First of all, the statute has enabled consumer review websites to adopt heterogeneous editorial practices. If we look at the offline world, there's basically only one model of editorial practices. The publisher knows they're liable for the content that they're publishing, so they have to exercise editorial control over it to the full degree to minimize their legal risk. That's the only model that works offline. There's no other model that people have adopted to. But in the online world, we've seen, because of the statute, and because it says you're not liable whether you exercise editorial control or whether you don't, we've seen a whole heterogeneity, a whole diversity of ways that consumer review sites are managing their corpus of consumer reviews. Now, it's not to say we figure out the right way, and in fact, there may not be a single right way of managing consumer reviews. But we're given the freedom to look at the different practices and to customize those practices for the needs of consumers. We've also seen, as a kind of corollary to that, experimentation by the consumer review websites. We don't see a lot of experimentation with new publication formats, again, because the publishers are worried about their legal risk. But once we take that off the table, consumer review websites can do all kinds of interesting, different things that they couldn't have tried in the offline world. We've seen that, in a sense, the statute provides a subsidy or a financial privilege to online sites over offline sites. They get a better financial deal than the offline publishers do. What they do with that subsidy or that financial privilege is that they can plow that into providing incentives for consumers to provide their reviews. Now, I mentioned I was at Opinions. Opinions actually pays consumers cold hard cash for their reviews. So the way that the Opinions gets the reviews is it says, we will give you cash in your pocket to pay for that. Well, where does that cash come from? One way to think about it is it comes from the financial privilege that the statute gives it. Because they're not spending money running around trying to minimize their liability or writing checks to plaintiffs, they're able to put that money into developing new consumer reviews. The statute also protects the long tail of consumer reviews. In my opinion, the most valuable consumer reviews aren't the 1,000th review of a product. It's the first review on a product that is such low market demand that the professional reviews were ignoring it. And so it's, again, a completely new class of reviews that we weren't seeing in the offline context. By definition, those consumer reviews aren't going to generate the publisher a whole lot of money. They're too long-tailed, niche-y, esoteric, however you want to describe it, that the publisher doesn't make a lot of money from any particular review on these long-tailed items. So in a world where the publishers felt that they had a financial cost associated with those reviews that was more than de minimis, then those reviews would be highly risked. For example, a aggrieved business could send a heckler's veto type of notice. They could contact the website, say, that review is defamatory, take it down. The website say, this review makes me no money. The dominant course of action will be to wipe it off. And then we lose those very high-value reviews on these long-tail niche products where there's a small audience for them, but that audience is not cost-effective to support without a low-cost solution. And similarly, and my final point about how consumer reviews have been enabled to do good things for the economy through 47 UC 230 is that 47 UC 230 protects truthful negative information. This is the information that's most highly at risk in an information ecosystem. By definition, it's goring someone's ox. That person is going to have incentives to try and get rid of that content. And they're going to use all tools available at their means, including legal persuasion, to eliminate the negative content, especially when it's truthful, when it hits close to home. That's the content that they would like not to actually be accountable for. They want to be a bad producer who doesn't get drunk out of the marketplace. What the statute does is that it ensures that the online sites can maintain that truthful negative information without fear of liability for it. Without having to prove that it's true, it's not their problem to prove it, and they don't have to incur the cost to do so. So this actually creates a situation where the most valuable content, truthful negative information, actually can remain in the ecosystem rather than pushed out. So the way I think about the statute is that it's effectively acted as a turbocharge on our economy. It's taken our economy and made it better by dislodging this information that improves the invisible hand and then helping the invisible hand do the things that we want it to do. And with that, I'm going to call my remarks off, and I will continue the discussion. Thank you.